Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the Draw Juice universe. I'm Chris Petracchi, and on this channel I give you the juice to help you draw better and draw better portraits. Thanks for tuning in. It is 1 week after Thanksgiving. We had a great time. By the way, just let me know in the chat if you can hear me and see me and that all is well. That would be much appreciated. Yeah, we had Thanksgiving. We went up north of San Francisco to Marin County, visiting my aunt, cousins, and my mom, me, my wife, and I. Went up there. We had a great time, and then we got a hotel so we didn't have to drive all the way back, and just relaxed. Got up the next day, did some sightseeing, and then drove back. So it was a great time, and so it's awesome to be here once again. Took a week off. Hello, Mr. Pruett. I cannot. Thomas, audio's good. Yeah, my camera's off. That is correct. Thanks, Thomas. Welcome back. And Iqbal Preet, how you doing? Nice to see you. Today we're going to go through my battle for creativity. We have been going through that for, a couple of months, but it is absolute gold. And I want to share it with you because it will help you in your artistry, your craftsmanship in general. And it's helped me. My phone is going off here. Let me stop it. I use this as a professional artist, both in the United States and in China. All the concepts there are solid and want to share them with you. So let me kind of jump into that, and then we'll do a couple of critiques, and maybe I'll do some drawing. But if that's all right with you, we'll do that. So we've been going through this, like I said, we're near the end. And by the way, if you want this resource, it's on my Draw Juice website. So go over there to drawjuice.com. You can get this. It's completely an amazing resource, very affordable, and I suggest that you get it and go through it. But let's start with tapered shapes. So these are kind of the answers to the obstacles that you'll find whenever you begin or want to begin a creative endeavor. And just as an artist and as a creative in general, you're going to find lots of things inhibiting you or standing in your way. And so this battle for creativity resource, this handbook, is there to try and really distill that down, the psychology of being an artist, the landscape of creativity that we confront, which is basically we're in kind of a war or a battle. And so we have friends and enemies. And so we talk about the enemies and we name them, and then we present the answers to those things, how to overcome each of those things. So one of the allies that we have here is tapered shapes, right? Tapered shapes. So let's kind of get into that. But here's our allies, right? Tapered shapes. Wide to narrow. Pretty easy concept. So contrasting shapes, why are they important? Because they create variety, and variety creates interest. You don't want to make boring shapes, okay? So, a boring shape, what would that look like? A boring shape could be like this. But an interesting shape could be like this. you know, kind of more like that, right? Or, you know, here's a boring shape, but here's a little bit more of a dynamic shape, right? That's a tapered shape. It's wide into narrow, right? So you can give your shapes more of a dynamic feel, more action, more movement. So why do we want to use tapered shapes? Because variation and contrast occur in nature all the time, everywhere. You never see, you know, parallel lines in nature, or equally spaced things. They're usually organic, a little more random, right? So you'll see a couple things tight, a couple loose, you know, stuff like that, or things spread out, a little more random. That's more like nature. So big into small, thick into thin. Those shapes are both more interesting and more natural. So let's take a look. All right, so you can see pretty quickly how this works with anatomy. It works with the exoskeleton of arachnids, insects, right? Their plate exoskeleton, like the armor. It works in, you know, like I said, anatomy, bird anatomy of the wing, trees, eyebrows. Just look around, right? If you see a nose hole, you know, the nose hole is usually not like this. It's kind of like maybe a little bit more like that, or just like a little comma shape, right? So it's kind of thick into thin. And so I just love how this works. So we've got thick into thin, wide into narrow, right? And then you can break that down into smaller refining facets. Right? It looks good design-wise, and there's kind of a flow to it that I see, which I think is cool. There's kind of like this nice flow through this. There's a flow from this into the next thing, right? They kind of flow into and out of each other, right? So they get thick, they get thin, and then they can get thick again, and then thin, have a little overlap. And especially if you look at trees and you think trees are really, really tough. Yes, they can seem to be overwhelming and tough, but if you look at a tree, you may find that, you know, you may find something like that. Right, and you have this thick, little things like that. Or they might go this way. Right, you can get away with not knowing much about trees. You know, if we have thick into thin, you can quickly draw the impression of a tree without knowing much about it. you know, and that's it unlocks a lot. So if we do thick into thin, see, right? So that's kind of how that concept works. And so it's kind of a universal tool. And that's why these things are so powerful. So tapered shapes, wide into narrow. Again, you can use it for anatomy, arms, legs, body parts, nose, eyebrows, hands, tendons, ligaments, insects. It's kind of like a lobster tail here. Spider legs. Seems to be just built into nature, these kind of things. And I imagine that there's a structural reason for this. You know, as you branch out, let's say a tree limb, you know, as it branches out from the base, this support right here, if it branches out and it's just the same thickness everywhere, it might just snap off. So this support can only bear so much weight. And so the tapered design helps it to, you know, the branches to go out, the leaves to go out, to get more sunlight so they can do the photosynthesis to provide energy for the tree to live. And, you know, blood vessels do the same thing. They go from thick all the way to the very fine capillaries, feeding oxygen and nutrition to the tissues that are very far from the heart, right? So it seems to be kind of a structural thing, but it's also, as we look at it, it's aesthetic as well. So there's functional design and there's aesthetic design. And we kind of see the aesthetic part of it, but there's that functional reason for it too. I don't know if that makes sense. Let's see. Let's move on to the next one. Let me know in the comments if that has made some sense. All right, this one's great. The psychology of shapes. So when you're designing something, and have you ever thought of psychology of shapes, right? Very interesting concept. So you want to ask, what impression are you trying to create? What's the mood? What's the feel? What are you trying to say? And Leonardo da Vinci said a drawing isn't any good unless it conveys some feeling or emotion. All right? So after you ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to create? What impression? Then what are the shapes that are going to convey that the best? So what do soft shapes do, and what kind of impression do they give the viewer? What does it say about your design's attitude? And what would angular shapes say instead? So if you know ahead of time what you want to say, then you can use shapes and designs to support that. Pretty simple. That's all we have as visual artists is shapes, lines, values, right? Design. So let's look at this, because this is really amazing stuff here. All right. Everything kind of can be distilled down to a ball, box, or a cone or triangle. So ball, box, tube, and cone, let's say. And each of these shapes has a kind of psychology. It has an emotional charge attached to it, let's say. And so if we look at the box and we look at some examples, right? It's very structural. The box is very, very stable, very heavy. What happened to my... Okay. So, one of the attributes of the box, its emotional content, the impression is strength. Okay, it's also dependable. It's powerful, and it's boring, right? It's reliable and boring, but powerful. So it might be a good friend, but it could also be a terrible foe because of its power. So we have the Hulk here. The Hulk was a good guy, but he was wild. He was untamed. He didn't know what he was going to do. So he was strong, but I think he was good. So the box really is kind of, it's heavy, right? So you've got the slow delivery of the mail. So look at the design of the mailman's vehicle, right? It's just boxy. The function of it is to haul boxes of mail. So it doesn't need to be fast, it doesn't need to be fancy, it just needs to be reliable and get the mail from point A to point B. Look at the cruise liner. It's also big and bulky, going slow. It's supposed to just translate passengers from point A to point B. And so it's bulky and big. And so its function, right? Oops. Okay, so the psychology. It's dependable, it's boring, it's strong, it's powerful. And if we go over to the triangle is kind of dangerous, right? It is perhaps not as stable, and it's got these angles, these points, right? This whole thing is one big spike, and that spike is kind of dangerous, right? These kind of things, these horns. So if we look down and we look at what impression this lizard here, this wolf here, the shark, and Darth Vader, okay, those things are all made up of triangles, right? This whole wolf's head is full of triangle shapes, tapered shapes. These eyes, maybe we could make them into triangles. So it's spiky, it's dangerous, it's dynamic, it's fast. Whereas the square was slow, the triangle is fast, danger. So if we look at the shark, again, triangles everywhere. Run. Look at Darth Vader. He's a total triangle. He's a black triangle. And I don't know if we have, so if you think of triangles, again, if we think of this, right? If we think of this, if we think of this, right? Is that kind of the devil, right? Triangles, the bat, Bat's got triangular kind of stuff. Got big ears, flying. Okay, so evil, dark, and if we look at the function, the form of the function, if you look at something like a speedboat, a race car, their function is to move quickly. And so aerodynamically, it's wide at the back and narrow at the front. Same thing with this speedboat. And so in order for it to travel fast, it's got to look a little different. So the form is following the function of this. So the triangle is fast, dangerous, youthful, perhaps, right? And then let's go over to the circle. The circle's friendly, it's soft, it's cute. It says, come here. The triangle says, go away. The circle says, hey, I'm friendly, come on over. So if we look at these cute dogs, penguins, little baby pigs and rabbits and stuff, it's all cute stuff, friendly stuff. Look at that vehicle, the Hello Kitty vehicle. Just on a gut level, when you look at each of these things, it gives you an impression. So the cute big eyes, right? Round feet, round mouth. And so that's the psychology of shapes. It gives you a big impression, not on a verbal, right? It's on a gut level. It hits you instantly, right? And that's the big thing about the read in your art. If you can get the read correct. The read is about the big impression. It's about the big picture, and the big picture never lies. So try and pick your shapes according to the mood that you want to put across to the viewer. Okay? So if you want a peaceful, passive, loving kind of portrait, let's say, or illustration, try to use rounder shapes, rounder edges. Don't use a lot of triangles. Now you can use some triangles, but 80% of it could be round, friendly shapes, and 20% could have some triangles or even squares in it, but overall it would have the impression of a round, friendly thing. Get it? There's a lot more that could be said with that, but let's move from here. Let's do one more, or let's jump over to doing a couple of not tutorials, but critiques here. I gotta get some water. Okay, so far so good. So I've got a Discord group, and link is in the description, and students are there. It's a great friendly place. People are learning, supporting each other, submitting their artwork, and so I'm doing some critiques from that Draw Juice community group. So feel free to join that. It'd be great to have you. So Cyrus Francis has submitted this portrait, and this looks great. And Cyrus has submitted some really nice stuff in the past. So let's see. I think this is great, Cyrus. It's very bold. It's very confident in terms of its values, and it's got nice lights and nice rich darks, and so that is well done. Very well done. Let me see what kind of brush I can get here. Okay. And there's some really nice, not only boldness in the values, but there's boldness in the marks that you're making, which I think is really cool. So this highlight here, this one here, even these, they're not in the reference, but you've gone ahead and highlighted them, so to speak. You've highlighted the highlights. And I like that. I like that kind of chance that you're taking there. Just putting down a mark and just letting it be. I think it works in relationship to all the other beautiful things that you put down, and gradual gradations from skin to hair, right? Describing the structure of the eye socket and so on. And then when you put a nice big bold shape like that, or a highlight, it looks nice, right? Especially if it's kind of the right shape and the right value, you can get away with something like that. Because it definitely, you know, these highlights, they're describing edges. The highlight is there because that's where the form change is. So if we draw this, right, there's that highlight. It's there because it's showing, it's differentiating between the top and the side plane of the nose, right? There's another one here, right? So that's where, you know, the nose stops being a front and becomes a side, right? Stops being a side and becomes a bottom or an underplane. Same thing here. We've got these plane changes, front plane to side plane, and that's where the highlight is. So not only shadows will find the edges for you, the highlights will find the edges for you too. And start looking for those as well. Okay. Okay, let's see. So, love the values, love the bold strokes. I love the way that the shape is there, the anatomy is there, the rendering is there, and that's all cool. It may be getting a little bit dark in the local color of the skin, because in here it looks a little muddy. And if it's looking a little muddy, it may be because it's out of value, right? So the darks are getting a little too dark. It's not bad, but it's just getting a little bit muddy looking. Now, one thing here in the shadows, right here and right here, you didn't do something that you did right here, which was the bounce light. So if we look at the reference, you see a nice bit of reflected light right against the hair. Okay, so you have the hair here. Okay, then you have a core shadow here. And right in between those things is this reflected light, which is this thing here. You can see one here. You can see it here. Right, it's just this little reflected light thing. And so you did it so nicely right here. But up here and here, it's not there, and it just looks a little dark. It's starting to get muddy looking here. And so what you might want to do is just do what you did in the cheek and bring in a slight separation, even though it's not there in the reference. I mean, it is there, but it's very subtle. That could help. And then right here, I actually see it. right? And it can't be too light. It can't be as light as the light side. That'll confuse everything. It'll confuse the viewer, and it'll break the rules that you've set up here in terms of excuse me, how light works and how forms respond to light. In this scenario, everything facing to the right and up gets light, is lighter, and everything facing left and downward gets a shadow. So I want my lightest dark to be darker than my darkest light. I'll say that again. I want my lightest dark, like in this reflected light, to be darker than my darkest light, right? And just make sure it is, and it is. But I think it could be darker. So if I just go there, keep it subtle, okay? And that can help with some of that stuff that gets looking a little muddy. And then one more thing. But I did want to say that this texture of the skin looks amazing. I love how it's so smooth here, and it's really in the right ballpark for her local value of her skin. One thing about the hair is, as we talked about with tapered shapes and organic shapes in nature, they're not really uniform distance, uniform in, they're not parallel. And so what I see here, and this is easy to do, but everything is equal distant on these little strands of hair. See that? Like the spaces in between are kind of the same. Even over here, you've got this, which is the same width as that, same width as that, same width as that. So it gets looking a little, it stands out. It kind of calls attention to itself. It doesn't look as natural. Right, so you want to kind of stagger that stuff. Right, so create some ways of hiding that regularity in the spacing. That makes it look a little more natural and less kind of calculated. And you can fill up the gaps a little bit. You can completely fill up gaps, and just kind of play with that edge a little bit so it's not so uniform. Right? That's a small thing, but I figured I'd point it out just because everything else is so good that we could get down to some of that, the smaller detailed, finer points. It's a small fix, but it has a big, kind of a big impact. And so watch that, okay? So just scanning and looking for the final comments here. Yeah, maybe a little bit too heavy with the highlights right around here in the chin. Some of those could be toned down just a little bit, maybe. So they don't compete, right? We want to have a hierarchy of attention. If everything is screaming at us, then we can't hear anything. And, you might want to play down a little bit one of the highlights so you have, the biggest highlight somewhere, Where do you want to have it? Right, so playing around with that 1, 2, 3 read kind of thing, moving the eye around. Like you don't need this one here on the neck to be as bright and competing with this one here or this one here. And same thing with these guys. Just play them down just a little bit. We don't want to give the eye too much so that it can't take it in. Okay, cool. Great job, Cyrus. Love it. Hume says, hi, do I know Daryl? Hume Edgar says, do you know Daryl? Daryl who? Let me know who you mean by Daryl. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, let's go with this one. This is lovely. I like this a lot. Beautiful, beautiful colors, beautiful shapes, values, edges, really, really nice. The colors. Interesting. Nice control of the edges. Right, that crisp edge right along the forehead, hair boundary. Right, like that. Just how it is right there, boom. You know, the contrast of edges is so good and so powerful, because when you make something so separate like that, such a crisp edge, it makes this stuff look even softer, right? So because you've gone hard and crisp here, you can see the subtlety of this beautiful structure of the cheek, right? Of the chin. It's soft, so hard and soft edges. If everything's hard edged, then well, you won't have as much variety. And if you're trying to make things look soft and everything's hard, it's not going to look soft. So you need some hard edges as a foil to those things that are soft. Okay? It's just the way the eye works. And so that contrast of edges is really powerful. And so you've got that. Nice job. Love it. So I'm just kind of thinking how, you know, the eye kind of gets pulled to the right. It's drifting a little bit. And so you might want to firm that up just a little. Seems to be kind of... Let's just try something here. I'm just gonna make my feather about 7 and just grab this whole thing, Command J, Command T, and then just kind of, let's see if I can warp this thing. Just pull it in towards the right just a little bit. And we might need to make it just a little bit bigger. Okay. So you've got the great edges, the great shapes, the great colors. And it could be, you know, I'm thinking that in here you need to push the values in the cheek a little bit more because I'm not getting the form, and you need contrast to create form. So value contrast create forms. A change in value equals a change in form. So another way to say that is a value change equals a form change. And so I would push that a little bit, because we need a little bit of structure in there, because we've got a lot of definition here at the contour edge of the face. We need something inside that's maybe going to be as strong as that to balance it out. So if I just sample from here, you know, and just see, or just sample from here and go a little bit darker and just go along that zygomatic. And that looks a little cool to me. I want to warm it up. So I usually go in with kind of like hard edges, and just to get the placement and the shape correct, and then I'll soften the edges as needed. All right, so I'm just squinting my eye, and when I squint, I can see the values and the edges better.